Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good.
Excellent. Thank you for holding down the fort again last week and leading a fun little conversation about Kingdom Hearts with Cameron and then friends of the show, Christian and Brandon. If you haven't caught that, go check that out. That's a 2.5 hour conversation, deep dive into all sorts of Kingdom Hearts gobbledygook, where I was like, you guys have fun with that conversation. I'm going to sit this one out. I'm just going to chill. But thank you for taking point on that. It was, you wanted to do that as kind of like a standalone thing. And I was like, or you could just make that this week's episode. And so that's what we did.
It's funny to think there was a time when I didn't think it would be 2.5 hours. Like
right?
I thought, oh yeah, we could have like a short video, and then it just like ballooned up. And I was like, but it was a really good conversation though.
Yeah, pretty much any conversation where you're going to involve Cameron and diving into lore and theories and stuff is like that right there is going to add like an hour of time. And throwing Christian and Brandon in, who also have a deep love of Kingdom Hearts, of course. That's I was almost surprised that it wasn't longer. But yeah. So yeah, go check that out if you missed that episode. But today's episode is going to be we're gonna have kind of a little like front loaded half is gonna be some movie talk. I went and saw since the time I've been on the show last, I've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once. Frank went and saw, or has seen, I guess not went and saw at this point, but saw The Kingsman, the Kingsman prequel with Ray Fiennes. I also just yesterday went and saw The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, so I'll give some thoughts on that. And that's kind of our little movie block, but then we'll also talk some Mass Effect 3 because Frank went and finished that up. I just got back from seeing the musical Hadestown, so I'm going to gush about that a little bit and just that show in general. And then we will wrap up with some DMC Devil May Cry thoughts because Frank's been playing that too in this kind of like lull period between like we had the big burst of games at the beginning of the year, and now we're kind of like waiting for the next set of new big things to come grab us. But very cool. Before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping though. Go check out That Bond Show. We have finally made it to the Brosnan era, which is where I actually know what to expect and what we're seeing. So this most recent week was GoldenEye. So you can go check me and Logan's thoughts on that one. That one being like probably the first and like most integral to both of our Bond experiences. Certainly would have been the first one I would have ever seen, and then because of I think its place in pop culture and the time and of course tying into the game, it was certainly a big one for a lot of people. And then also you can go still see Cameron's ongoing series Friday Night Dying Light, so go check that out as well. Every Friday night as he continues playing through Dying Light 2 in a series that may never end. I don't know how much longer it's going to take him to finish that game. We're up to, I think, 12 episodes in, and he's still going strong. So yeah, go check out all that stuff. You can find all both of those shows over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. That Bond show goes up every Saturday, and Friday Night Dying Light goes up Friday nights, of course. If you enjoy what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So kicking things off, this is a couple weeks old at this point, but I went and saw, after hearing a lot of people gush about it, I went and saw Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this is one of those movies that I went in knowing very little about it. Sometimes like especially these more like indie movies or I guess just not the like the big blockbusters where we go and watch trailers of sometimes just movies will pop up and people like will catch me through word of mouth. And so I think without even seeing a trailer for this movie, I was like I'd seen like ads for it and stuff, but I'd not like Instagram things or something like that. I'm scrolling through stories and it'd be like Michelle Yeoh like her face doing something, and I have no context for what's going on. But so I went and saw this movie, and I think that is like one of the best ways to go experience this movie is to not really necessarily like you might know what it's about or something like that. Like a lot of the narrative around it is like it's a multiverse movie that does multiverse better than Marvel or something like that. I think that's, I think that's somewhat hyperbole or something like that. Or, but it is certainly audacious for a movie as a standalone thing to be doing a multiverse in a way that like is not the comic book movie feel and vibe. Um, but Michelle Yeoh is the central character of it. My favorite actually description of the movie is like a movie about a woman trying to do her taxes, because that is what this movie is ostensibly about. Just a lot of things kind of go awry. But Michelle Yeoh is really great in it. Ki Hui Kwan is also phenomenal in it, and he is probably best known to audiences as Short Round from Indiana Jones: The Temple of Doom or Data from the Goonies. Went and basically stopped doing acting for many many years, but then when like Crazy Rich Asians kind of came on the scene, he thought there was maybe a place for him back acting again, and he comes in and just like knocks it out of the park in this movie in a very like difficult role, because a lot of what he has to do is like the exposition of like explaining this multiverse and the rules of the movie and whatnot. um but he does it effortlessly, sometimes while doing cool martial arts stuff and sequences, and he's just a ton of fun to watch, and like I don't like I knew he was in it going into it, and I remember thinking not too long ago, I was like, wonder whatever happened to the guy who played Short Round. And so seeing him just like pop back up in this and finding out this like backstory of he'd kind of walked away because there wasn't roles for Asian Americans in Hollywood and stuff like that. Um and like that story of seeing representation and getting him back into it is like that's really cool. And
Yeah.
so he's really good in it. Michelle Yeoh, as I said, also very good in it. It's also a lot of like, I feel like it's a I think of Michelle Yeoh and I think of a lot of her like martial arts stuff, especially because we on that Bond show, it'll be next week's episode, but we recently just watched Tomorrow Never Dies, which I had completely forgotten she was in. And she
Mhm.
it's one of her earlier like Western films, and she was great in that. Um but it's the martial arts side of things, and it's her kicking ass is like what we think of with her so much, and in this she has like she's carrying a lot of emotional weight in the film. And because of the nature of it being like a multiverse film where you kind of bounce through and you see these different versions of these characters, she just gets to play a lot of different variations of that, and I think she gets to have a lot of fun with that. There's some great, just like insane comedy in this movie as well, in fun and surprising ways, and just the ways they play with the multiverse concept, is yeah, it's a lot of fun. Um, and Also, I want to give a shout out to, I gotta find her name here real quick. The actress who plays basically the daughter in this film, Stephanie Sue, playing Joy. I think this is like one of her earliest roles, but she kills it. She's out there, on par, on level with everybody else in this film. And she's just, yeah, she's doing a great job. Jamie Lee Curtis is also in there, some fun roles. Harry Shum Jr., who I like I heard he was in this before I went and saw it, and it was like, oh, and he's like in a very funny cameo, and that's all I'm going to say. He's in a very funny cameo, and I remember him from Glee. He's one of the like more ancillary background people from Glee, but he's in here, and every moment he is on screen in his little cameo role is just like pitch perfect comedy that just keeps getting better and better and better each time they come back to that particular joke. So yeah, shout out to that, and just shout out to to the like the audaciousness of this movie as a whole. They pack a lot in there, but it is a ton of fun. Most of it, it like most of the humor for me really hit. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. I had a great time with this. It's definitely, it's an easy front runner for a favorite movie of the year. And I like, and just in a lot of interesting and cool ways. Like there's a lot of fun action to the movie. There's fun humor, but then there's also like cool, like philosophical conversations that happen, as well as just like a lot of grounded like character performances and relationship beats that are like, oh, like shout out to everything that movie does, and just how well they pull it off with 2+ hours of screen time. So yeah, that's me gushing on that. It's been bubbling up, and I've been waiting to talk about it on a podcast for a couple weeks. So any I don't know if this is one that you've had your eye on, Frank, or have any interest in seeing. I think you would love it. Having talked to you about movies and stuff, I think you would have a ton of fun with this one. So definitely check it out if you can. Have you seen a lot about it? Do you know much about it?
I saw the trailer before Uncharted when I went to go see
Mhm.
Uncharted, and that was I think the first time I had heard of the movie. But yeah, off the bat, I was like, "Oh, this looks amazing!" Like I'm super interested in it, and I've been wanting to go see it since it came out a couple weeks ago, and I just haven't had the chance. But yeah, I'm like dying to see that movie because yeah, I think it is something that looks really awesome.
Yeah, it's a rare one. So obviously we don't have Alamo in Phoenix anymore, but like the all of those chains basically changed the branding to the Majestic, and I kept like looking on their docket to see if they were going to get this one, and they just never did. So this was like one of the rare times I went back to Harkins Theater, because like as the like it was very much a like limited release movie that has just been building word of mouth, and kind of just expanding and expanding, because of that word of mouth. And so when it finally expanded over here into the Arizona market, I was like, all right, well, if Majestic, my preferred place, isn't getting it, yeah, I'll go ahead and brave it. Immediately reminded why I don't like seeing Harkins movies, because like the like of the five of us that were in this theater, like one of the guys is just like talking back to the screen during the trailers. I'm like, shut up, dude. Like, shut the hell. Like, I immediately missed the like no talking, no texting kind of mantra of an Alamo or Majestic. Fortunately, they did shut up by the time the movie started. But it was still like a man, I wish I could have seen this in my preferred environment. But still a lot of fun, and definitely a huge recommendation from me if you can go see it, and if you're feel safe and comfortable seeing movies in the theaters. Definitely check this one out. If not, go see it. Like, I mean, definitely seek it out when it comes to VOD, or whatever streaming service it ends up on. But I like, there's also, I think a lot of the fun of this one is seeing it with other people. Um, because there was like just seeing it and hearing the like, even in a theater of only five people, hearing all of those other five people laugh at the same things I was laughing at, or the things they were laughing at that like I was just like smiling, like chuckling to, or the things that were like I got a big guffaw and nobody else did. Like, I think there's a fun in that element of this film. And then there's also some really cool spectacle things that I think will probably play better on a big screen. But if you can't see it, definitely like this also strikes me as like one of those movies that like the Alamo will do screenings of for years to come, and they'll do movie parties or something like that. So yeah, definitely seek this one out if you can. Shout out to Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was a ton of fun. And I look forward to just chatting up with more people once more people have seen it. Whether that's you, Frank, or Logan, or anybody else, feel free to ping me, and let's chat about this movie. Um, with that, I will throw it over to you, Frank, to tell me about The Kingsman.
Yeah, so I missed this one when it was in theaters because I was really looking forward to it, and the trailer looked kind of cool. And I guess I'd even back it up a little bit further. Like I really like the Kingsman movies,
Hmm.
especially the first one. I thought was really great, and it like I enjoy action movies, but I feel like those movies are similar to me with like John Wick, where it's like a different level of like, oh, the cinematography is great, that action scenes are choreographed super well and like acted super well, and then even there will be like comedy beats and other fun moments, and it's just like, and they even have to me like cool worlds. Like John Wick has such a cool world, and I think the Kingsman world is kind of cool, where they have this like organization that is like based off of the Knights of the Round Table, and they kind of all, and it's also like set in like a really old suit shop in London,
Yeah.
and like it's cool to see this movie's about kind of the establishment of a lot of that, and like why, and it kind of like explains like why some of those things are the way they are. And ultimately, like I didn't expect too much from the movie. Like I thought, oh, this will be like a fun action movie, and I was kind of like blown away by how good I thought it was. Like like the action scenes were incredible. There's some really amazingly like well thought out set pieces that also involve like World War One, and it's like surprisingly historically accurate to World War One too.
Mhm.
Like they almost did the Assassin's Creed thing where they pulled like real world events and then tried to like put more around like what was happening, and like that was super cool to see. And there's a lot of really good actors in the movie, including the one that I got like a pop for was the guy who plays Zemo in the MCU
Oh, okay. Yeah.
is in this movie, and like and so I was like, oh, that's great. And I'm like, and he's just kind of playing like a Zemo character, so like that was pretty funny.
Nice. I
Um,
I after seeing that trailer so many times for The King's Man, it wasn't until it finally came out that I realized that, is it Rasputin, I think, who's in it?
yeah, yeah.
Is, Reese Ifans, AKA the Lizard, from Amazing
Oh.
Spider-Man. Like, he I just saw him in all those trailers, and he was, like, just buried under that beard and makeup that I didn't, like, piece together who it was. I was like, "There's something familiar about that guy," but it wasn't until, like, seeing somebody talk about him and being like, "Yeah, he's really good in this." And I was like, "Oh, hey, cool. It's the Lizard. Neat."
And I didn't even put that together, but that's like really funny that we get this like weird MCU
Mhm.
crossover. And because he was also really good and really cool as Rasputin, and there's even like a really cool. I don't want to ruin too much, but there was like a really cool fight scene with him, and his fighting style is like this weird Russian ballet fighting style
Mhm.
that incorporates like a lot of like Russian dance moves, and it's like really interesting how like he's this giant dude with like a knife, and he's like actually really elegant and like jumping around, and like nobody can get to him. It was really interesting. I mean, that's one of those cool things though, again, about how like the choreography is so good. Like they totally went like above and beyond where they're like, oh, he's like a Russian guy. Okay, let's give him like all of these like Russian associated things. And he ends up being like a really cool character. Um and then it was a really good movie that I think I recommend people check out, especially if you like the other Kingsman movies. And like, there's a lot I would love to say about it, but I think it would just end up spoiling some of the moments, especially because there were just some things that I was even like surprised by, and I thought were like really like bold and like really made the movie like that, it like elevated the movie even further.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm like, man, I really enjoyed it. Like, I think it ended up being really good, and a lot of the actors in it are just end up being like really good at like what they're going for.
Yeah, as a fellow fan of, like, the series, it was definitely on my radar for a long time, and I think it came out at the end of the year, like, right after or right like, yeah, right after, Spider-Man: No Way Home, and it was just kinda like, well, I saw Spider-Man: No Way Home a couple times in theaters. I don't think I really need to see, like, to go back and see this one. I'll catch it when it comes to VOD if if I'm really interested in it. Especially because like, yeah, so much of what I liked about the other ones was Taron Egerton's performance, and Colin Firth, and so like taking those elements, it was definitely one of those like I don't know why you're making this movie. I kind of just want to see a Kingsman 3. Just do that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, hearing good things about it and hearing in particular like a lot of the kinetic fight choreography is still like the same. That is like as you're talking about it, I think that is like one of the highlight elements of that series is they're so deliberate in the shooting of their fight scenes and their shootouts and their choreography in a way that feels. I haven't seen the John Wick movies, but like from what I understand of the John Wick, it is like incredibly well choreographed and edited together versus just like a movie where there's a fight and they're hiding things with the cuts and over editing the movie just to mask that stuff more than anything else. So I think like the things that the Kingsman movies do really well is like show you every part of those fights and make them all engaging and cool and interesting to see. And from the from the clips or the scenes I've seen from the trailer and stuff of the Rasputin stuff, that sounds exactly like what they've done with that. And yeah, it's very cool. I think we were talking before we started recording. I think it's on HBO Max. So
Yeah.
just you talking about, it, I'm like, oh, especially because I'm also doing that Bond show. Now I just kind of want to sit down and watch all of those all of the Kingsman movies, because I love how the original ones are like a very, a subversion of slash honoring of a James Bond character. And so I'll be curious to see how this one feels as well, having watched 20 James Bond movies in back to back weeks at this point this year. Throwing it in. It's like doing that thing of like, oh, I now have a better appreciation for Austin Powers and
Yeah.
the specific things they were just making fun of in Austin Powers. Um, I think there'll be elements where I'll be like, oh yeah, I totally missed that was a thing that they were making fun of in the first Kingsman movie. But now that I've seen the Roger Moore era of Kingsman or the Sean Connery era, I will absolutely get a lot more. Um, so one of the things I want to pick your brain about this, because one of the things I remember hearing about the movie is that it almost plays like each act is almost a separate movie. They kind of
Mhm.
have like a 3-act structure that like really kind of like Act 1 focuses on such and such a story, and then Act 2 focuses on a story, and then Act 3 focuses on a story. Do you agree with that assessment? And if so, does that like break up the pacing of the film at all?
So yeah, like that is somewhat fair to say because I feel like it really is still like one kind of overarching story, especially like when you go from beginning to end and when I think back on it. But it does like move around, and you'll even be with like different characters who may be like the main kind of focal point of like certain things, and even like there's like an extended sequence you spend with like somebody who's like a different character than like the main kind of protagonist. But like I think that is what it didn't. I didn't think it hurt the pacing at all, and I think that was actually like that part where you kind of go off with this other character. I thought is like one of the best parts of the entire movie, and then it's like it just like it's ended up like surprising me a lot, and because like I didn't expect it to like kind of take that turn, and that's why I don't want to like ruin it too much. But then it's like I was just like surprised at some of the things the movie did, and but that's why I think that is a little bit fair to say because like you're jumping all over the place, like because it is World War I, and it's like a little bit before World War I, and then like the it kind of covers like a lot of the actual war, and you bounce around from like all these different countries, and like even like being on there's on the actual like front, like in the trenches.
Hmm.
So like they do a lot of cool things with that, and that's why I could see that though being like, hey, the first part feels like this weird kind of like Downton Abbey kind of like historical thing, and then the middle part feels like a straight up World War I movie,
Hmm.
and then the ending feels like this insane John Wick kind of like action stuff. So I could kind of see it totally feeling like these kind of like different movies
Yeah.
or kind of like different things put together.
Cool. Well, any final thoughts or any other highlights or anything you want to give a shout out to on the movie?
I think that's pretty much it because like there's definitely some things I would love to call out or talk about, but I just don't want to like spoil them because I
Hmm.
think part of what made them so amazing is just kind of like not knowing, what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because there's even one fight scene that I thought was like surprisingly tense. Like the way that they like it's such a brilliant idea of what they thought of, and then the way they actually execute it,
Hmm.
I thought was like amazing. Because again, it's like it goes back to like everything is choreographed so well and it's filmed so well that it's like it just left me being like, wow, that's like one of the coolest things I've ever seen like in a movie.
Yeah. And I think that's where so much of the joy from those movies can come from. Like I remember feeling the same about the first Kingsman, and light spoiler for that, but like the we'll call it the Westboro Baptist Church fight in that movie, that is like not at all a thing I was expecting, and it's obviously not
Yeah,
actually the Westboro Baptist, but it's very much like those are the people that they're they are
yeah,
kind of taking target on in that. But just like that whole sequence again is kind of a marrying of like, oh, this is a thing I wasn't expecting, so like there's an extra amount of joy and stuff coming from that, and going back to that note of like how deliberate every shot in that sequence is and how well choreographed it is. Like, you are never at a loss for what's going on where, like who is where in this fight sequence. And so that's definitely like one of those. I remember after that first one being like, I like there's going to be a really cool fight sequence in here. I don't want to tell you like much about it. And then something like even more like the climactic thing where like heads are exploding and fireworks and stuff. It's
Yeah.
just like, oh yeah, these movies sometimes go places you're not at all expecting them to go. But it's almost always in like fun and silly and engaging ways. Very cool. And yeah, I think it was definitely an element for me of like, oh, the settings, a bit of a turn off for me, and it just being like this origin story that I wasn't really looking for
Yeah.
when I think of the Kingsman stuff. I wasn't like, I really want to know why they modeled themselves around the Knights of the Round Table. I was like, they're British. That's all I needed to know. Like, I just kind of say like, that's why they do it. Um, but yeah, very cool. I'll definitely like. I'll probably. Who knows? Maybe I'll check it out tonight after we finish recording. Based on your recommendation here. So yeah, shout out to the Kingsman.
If you,
Yeah,
watch it, let me know, 'cause, that's one kinda like you were saying about everything, everywhere all at once, like, that's one I'd be happy to talk about,
yeah,
especially if you end up, checking it out,
yeah.
and to your last point there, I even kinda feel you where, like, I wasn't necessarily dying for, like, a prequel in this world, and then even then, I don't wouldn't necessarily say I want, like, a sequel with these per characters,
Hmm.
but I think they have the potential now to do, like, a really cool Assassin's Creed thing where we just go through time
Hmm.
and like go through different conflicts and see like how the Kingsmen were involved. Like I think that would be like really cool.
Yeah, like I remember when the second movie came out and they kind of like they introduced the statesman and being like, "Oh, like it'd be cool to see a spin-off of those characters."
Yeah.
And I feel like that was in the works at some point and then things probably just ended up falling through and stuff, but yeah, it'll be curious to see what the future of that franchise holds. Cool. So I will segue us back into my movie side of things. Yesterday, I went and saw The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, aka the Nick Cage as Nick Cage movie. And like obviously that's what a lot of the trailers are like really kind of leaning into and the marketing and stuff. And he is definitely playing Nick Cage, but it is a very like dramatized version of Nick Cage. It is like it's not poking fun at Nick Cage himself. It is poking fun at like the persona of Nick Cage or the idea that like, how everything he does, he puts 110% of himself into. It's very much that kind of thing. And it's a really cool like examination of him and like he's very much in on any of the jokes, but what I think is like the real joy of the movie is that it effectively just turns into like a buddy comedy action movie
Mhm.
with him and Pedro Pascal. And like the chemistry that those two have are just like phenomenal and they're a ton of fun to watch anytime they're on screen. So much so that like my only like downside of this movie is that they throw in a few other like side stories and subplots and stuff to the movie to it in and the movie does a clever thing where it's kind of like poking fun at the fact that it's throwing in these other things to give it more like wide appeal and stuff like that. But there were definitely times where I was like, I wish they didn't have to throw that subplot into this movie and we could just get more of these two guys just being like buddies together. Because there was just so much like Pedro Pascal's character Javi is basically a Nick Cage super fan and invites Nick Cage out to his birthday party for $1 million payday for Nick Cage. And Nick Cage, who is not having the best of luck finding that next big role for himself, and is also going through a divorce. So he's got like some family stuff that he's kind of struggling with in the film. He basically like takes the payday, goes out there, meets this super fan, and they hit it off, and just like it's joyous to watch. And then as and this isn't a spoiler, as like the trailers kind of lead into, like he's also like Javi is also a suspected like head of a drug cartel, and so the US CIA is basically like tracking him, and when they see US actor Nick Cage getting, buddy buddy with him, they basically like recruit him in to kind of spy on Javi on behalf of the US government. And that's like, honestly, that's the like, I wish it didn't have that weird like secret agent subplot kind of thing. Um, Not that it leads to some fun moments in the film and some fun like misdirects and confusion and stuff, but like so many of the most fun moments are just when Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal are just like talking to one another and having these like either heartfelt emotional scenes or just like wild antics that they're going through that I don't want to get into for spoiler reasons in this one as well. Um but yeah, it's a lot of fun. It definitely like pays homage to a lot of Nick Cage's career, obviously. And Javi is as a super fan is like will throw out like lines of like, you drive, you have to drive because I read you did all your, or like I knew you did all your own stunts for Gone in 60 Seconds, and Nick Cage is like, that's right, I did. And and so like suddenly they're off in a car chase and Nick Cage is driving, or and so they kind of like just play around with, again, like Nick Cage the character. And Nick Cage also has Nikki is like another persona in this film that basically like Nick Cage will like talk to himself, and it's a much younger, like very intense version of himself that is, I believe, like a direct reference to this like off the top interview he did back in like the 90s or something on like a British talk show or something like that. Effectively like the best parallel I could give is like if Tom Cruise was in this movie,
Yeah,
it would
yeah.
be the Tom Cruise jumping on the couch like version of Tom Cruise. It's that, but for Nick Cage. And so like that version is basically like the devil on the shoulder, kind of always leading character Nick Cage into, maybe the not the best circumstances and stuff, but like Nick Cage just gets to act against himself and has a lot of fun in some of those sequences. um and so yeah, this was just it's one i I will freely admit I do not have a great like knowledge of Nicolas Cage's like repertoire, and some of like his biggest ones like Face Off. I don't think I've ever actually like seen Face Off. I've seen like
It's
bits
a
and
good movie.
pieces and stuff. But I've never like sat down and watched the whole thing. I mean, like the thing opens with basically a Con Air sequence playing out and like other characters being like, Nick fucking Cage, man. Yeah. um and Con Air is like one of those ones I love. There's like little, teases to National Treasure and The Rock and stuff. And then there's like deep cuts where like one of them kind of came up. I was like, I don't know if this is a real Nick Cage movie or if this is like a movie that they've created to put inside this movie as like as a weird little meta, fourth wall kind of thing. But yeah, there's a ton of fun in this one to be had. And yeah, it's just cool. Nick, like again, when Nicolas Cage like puts himself into a project, whether it's good or bad, there's never any doubt that he's putting himself into that project. He doesn't approach things half-assed, and even this movie kind of like addresses that mentality that he has, where it's like he, people say like like he kind of has this like argument with his agent or somebody who's basically like where he's talking like, people say like don't do as much, it's acting, it's the work, I should be working, I want to be working, why would people not want me? You can't just do that at your job. You can't just be like, I'm not gonna go to work for a while. Like I want to do the work, I want to be there, I want, and it's playing with like that rationale. That's one of those like things I never think of when you think of like big movie star. It's like, yeah, they don't have to work if they made $1 million or two on this last movie or something like that. But like he seems to have this desire, and how much of that is the character that they've created for him versus how much of that is real Nick Cage. Like it seems to be more real Nick Cage than not, based on interviews that he does and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just there's a lot of fun in this movie. And again, I think the most joy is when it's Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal lighting up the screen together.
Mhm.
And then when you have like Tiffany Haddish in there as like the CIA handler kind of thing, it's just like, I didn't really need this side of things, kind of mucking up this other story. But again, like even as even as I say that, the movie is well aware that that's what it's doing, and even kind of comments on it as the movie goes, where they will kind of have a wink and a nudge to the camera, not like fully breaking the fourth wall, but like they will be talking about the movie within the movie that they're trying to make or something like that. And they'll talk about how ridiculous it is to throw a kidnapping in there all of a sudden. And then they'll be like, yeah, but that's your marketing. That's your trailer moment. That's the thing we've got to have in this movie to get a big audience. I know it sucks and it does, it breaks with the tone that we're trying to do, but you got to do it sometimes. And so I appreciate that even that ties into the bigger elements of the movie that I do really enjoy. So yeah, there's another easy top 10 at the end of the year for me. Just like grounded by two incredible performances there from Nick Cage, especially, but then also Pedro Pascal's just always a delight to watch. So and the two of them together is just it's lightning. So yeah,
Th-
shout outs
this
to this one
is
as well.
This is another one I really want to see. Like I've seen the marketing all over the place for it, and even a quick shout out to like Nick Cage did a Reddit AMA that was actually pretty good because he's actually just seems like a really genuine, great guy.
Hmm.
Like he just answered a lot of questions really honestly, and even one of the ones to even your point about like him liking acting and just wanting to work. Like somebody was like, "What movies do you hate that people like reference, or like what lines do you hate when people throw at you?" And he's like, "I don't mind any of them. I just like that people are watching the movies."
Hmm.
Like and I'm just and I'm just like, yeah, he just seems like a really nice, just like genuine guy, even if he is like, has this like wild persona. But I even really like Nick Cage movies, even though I know he's done a ton of movies and he's done some bad ones. Like the ones that are really good, he's really good in, especially like even like Gone in 60 Seconds is like a classic for me that I like grew up watching all the time. And like I really like that movie. And I literally even rewatched it like a year ago. And I was like, yeah, this movie still holds up. This is a great movie. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
so that's why I'm really excited to see this one.
yeah. There's one I'm trying to like I'm looking through his IMDb right now because I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's this one, The Frozen Ground. Is this right? Let me pull up the IMDb here. Um, where are you, my friend? Where are you? Come on, let me. Yep, this is that movie.
Hmm.
So a friend of mine from college was in a Nick Cage movie called The Frozen Ground, and it's basically Nick Cage, like Nick Cage is in it, Vanessa Hudgens, John Cusack, and there it's like centered in Alaska. I don't remember what it's about. I've never seen it or anything like that, but I remember my friend Josh that I went to college with did theater. He like was born and raised in Alaska, came down to ASU for college, and then like has gone back. And he also like Josh, shout out to Josh, also was like the social media or like the community manager for Loot Crate for a while. And so like if you ever watched like Loot Crate, videos and stuff, like he was in that. But I remember him being in this Nick Cage movie, and he was like number 3 on the call sheet in a Nick Cage movie. And he's like Sergeant Trooper number 3 or something like that. So it was like probably just a very specific scene that he was number 3 on the call sheet for. But yeah, he like got to meet Nick Cage, and so I'm like, oh, I'm like 2 degrees from Nick Cage. That's really cool. And yeah, it's the epitome of one of those like, if it made it to theaters and wasn't just direct to DVD or whatever, it was probably a very like minimal. It didn't get like a ton of marketing behind it or whatever. It was
Yeah.
much more on those like Nick Cage is in this and he's the star of this movie, but this isn't one that anybody was like expecting to be the next big blockbuster or something like that. But Nick Cage was intrigued by the story and wanted to work on it and make it happen. And so shout out to that. So yeah, shout out to my friend Josh Ball for being in that movie with Nick Cage. And yeah, shout out to the unbearable weight of massive talent. Just a ton of fun. And it's another one that like I look forward to. I don't know if I'll go see it in a theater again, but and also I think this one also less so than everything everywhere all at once. Like this one probably doesn't really need the theatrical experience. Like if you just end up catching this on VOD and stuff, you're not gonna lose out a ton. But there was like a joy because the theater I was in was more full on that one, and it was fun just hearing the things that people reacted to and laughed at. That like that is a communal experience that even though I've been like going back to the movies for almost a year now, it is still definitely something that like I had not realized how much I missed during the the height of the pandemic there, where like everything was closed. So shout out to that movie as well. Yeah, definitely. That's another one. If you check that out, Frank, definitely let me know, and we will chat some more about it. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely.
all right, let's pivot away from movie talk, and let's dive over. You finished Mass Effect 3 and got your Mass Effect 3 Platinum. So let's talk a little bit about that. Last time you and I talked, I guess probably 3 or 4 weeks ago now, I think we talked about Mass Effect 2, which you'd done and gotten the Platinum in, and you would like just started Mass Effect 3. So yeah, what are your thoughts kind of revisiting Mass Effect 3 after all these years?
It's still a really good game, and it's interesting where like Mass Effect 2 is still my favorite, but like I know 3 is still really good, and I even liked it the first time I played it. It has a lot of, I'm recognizing now, it has a lot of great like quality of life improvements to like the Mass Effect formula, even like just being able to buy items on the Normandy and not have to go to like fly to the Citadel just to buy one thing and leave. Like, 'cause
Yeah,
that started to annoy me in 2.
yeah,
And even before I got to 3, I was like, man, why don't they just have a terminal on the Citadel I could do this at? And then as soon as I start 3, that's in like the tutorial. And I was like, oh wow, thank God.
yeah.
Like and all the motion and like the combat is like even better, and even the fact that you have an actual run, and like not only does that to me just feel better, it also I think makes the action set pieces like more dramatic, because
Mhm.
like it's a weird in 2 when like things are exploding, ships are falling apart or whatever, and you just have to like lightly jog
Yeah,
like
just
wherever you're going.
slowly trotting along. Yeah.
And so like this, you're like full sprinting, which like I appreciate. And it was a lot of fun because like I switched up my class, and I played as an infiltrator, which
Mhm.
kind of gives you that slowdown on the sniper. I think you said you play as that, um, and that was really fun. Like I went with like a different route this time than I normally would, like gameplay wise, where like I only had my pistol and my sniper rifle, and I was still able to kind of get through the whole game. And I eventually finally got the pistol I really like, which is that heavy pistol, the Carnifax pistol.
Mhm.
And I loved using that a lot, especially because like I was doing the thing where you can shoot with the sniper rifle through the Guardians. They have the shield, and you can go through the eye hole like we talked about, and that's a trophy, so you have to do that anyways.
Yep.
And I got the trophy using the sniper, but when I got that pistol, I was just walking around like popping those dudes in the head with that pistol through the thing.
Yep.
And I was like, man, it's just so satisfying. Like it just feels so good. Um, and one of the things I did want to talk about quickly too is there's one trophy I think is kind of bullshit, and it's because it's to lift 100 enemies off the ground,
Mhm.
but using your squad mate powers doesn't count, and
It
that's the only
it
one.
it does.
It not on the lifting your ones up, because I was using the squad mate abilities and it wasn't counting or tracking. I had
It
to go get one of the bonus abilities and like put it on me to use it.
it's specifically the lift like option. And so like some of your squad mates will have like abilities that will like pull them or something like that, but
Mm,
aren't lifting them. So yeah, it there's definitely some bullshit around that trophy. I remember, I know I know exactly what you're talking about, and it probably didn't bother me as much because I think I was playing as a biotic, so like
yeah.
I had that ability just as a natural one. But yeah, it's definitely like some of those where it is like you can use squad mate powers, but it is like it's only this specific squad mate that has it or something like that. And there was definitely like some times when I was playing through, like I think those were the ones I like just made a point to like knock those ones out as early as I could so that I could then have like focus on the late game stuff with like the squad that I actually wanted.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's I can appreciate the bullshit around that. Yeah.
I end like because yeah, because I wasn't playing as like a biotic, so I didn't have any like powers. And then eventually I got the slam ability and I tried to use that, and then that doesn't count. And then I because I even looked it up, and like the trophy guide is like, yeah, it lists like a couple different ones that can count, and then it was like slam the DLC trophy or like
Oh
DLC
yeah,
power doesn't count.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
I was like, And I was like, "Damn." And so then but it was like all these other ones that like are in the base game that would count for it. And I ended up getting it within when you do the Omega DLC, you get that power like lash or whatever where you
Mhm.
like grab them and rip them towards you.
Yeah.
And then that is what I was able to get it with pretty much. And especially in the late game, I was just walking around like throwing people around basically, especially because I had upgraded it. And you get like a one of the abilities is that sometimes there's no recharge,
Mhm.
and then I also like got the abilities to like lower the recharge a lot. So I was just throwing people around like every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Um, and that ability though, like was even like I was like, this is really cool. This is a really awesome ability. Like it's really fun. And it definitely like it I still want to do a biotic run through it sometime, which I'll definitely do. And like that made me even more interested in that because that's just like such a weird, fun power. And at one point I looked up in one of the missions, I was having trouble finding something I needed. So I looked up like a quick video of someone doing it and they were playing as a biotic. And I'm like, this is a totally different game. Like they're
Yeah.
teleporting around the room, they're
Yeah.
like blowing people up. Like
Yeah, it's I think Vanguard is what I think I originally played when I first played Mass Effect 3 years ago. I think I played as a Vanguard. And it's basically the one where like you can basically like teleport to enemies and that like and that will like blast them back and then you can also do like basically a ground slam that will like just push everybody back there. Like I did that all the time like no I think it's like Nova Slam or something like that. And that was like I basically turned into like a biotic usually is a ranged thing where yeah, you're lifting people up so that you can like pop them in the air or something like that. And like that like style is just like you were going super ham melee style. And so much so that like even your like because they yeah the third one has like if you're a soldier or something like your heavy melee is the omni blade kind of cutting through like your melee if you are one of those like vanguards or a heavy biotic or something is not your omniblade. It is just you punching with like a biotic fist basically and just wreaking havoc. And yeah, that was another like especially when you get those upgrades where it's like yeah um every there's like a 30% chance that this will have zero recharge. Like, okay, bam, I slam and then I slam and then oh, I got to slam 3 times in a row and just like yeah, like a swarm of husks just like are nothing now. They are they were there and now they do not exist. There's a lot of fun to be had and yeah, it's amazing how like something simple like that like the few kind of key abilities that you'll have can drastically change your gameplay style. Like even as an infiltrator like using like the basically the overshock or the electric and the fire abilities to like just
yeah.
disintegrate shields or armor. Like love using those. So
Yeah, I used
shout out to
the
that.
because I think yeah, they give you that incinerate ability, and
Yeah.
used that a ton until I got like leash eventually. Especially because I think there is a trophy for incinerating
Yeah.
people's armor or something.
Yeah.
So I got that one like first, and then but yeah, like that was super fun, and I enjoyed playing like that, and I definitely want to like do like a biotic run at some point. Um, because it's also one of those things where I wanted to almost start when I started Mass Effect 2, I almost wanted to do that, but I was like, "Man, it's been a while since I played. Let me just kinda do what I already did." Like,
Hmm.
so I kinda just like ended up making a lot of the same choices and a lot of the same things, but I always still want to go through and like do a renegade playthrough and make like different decisions. Because even well, this goes back to 2, but even when you do Samara's loyalty mission, I totally forgot if you pick the renegade option, like you could just get more and like you just get a totally different character. And then that has like different implications on 3 and like where that character is and what they're doing. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, just kind of change your playthrough.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like 3, I finally got to play all the DLCs,
Yeah, that's what I was
which
gonna
I
ask
had
about.
never played before. Yeah, I really liked all of them, especially the Leviathan DLC I thought was, like, amazing. Like, I was, like, super surprised at that, and I kinda started piecing it together before it, like, kind of, like, revealed everything, but even as soon as they, like, started going through things, I was like, "Man, this is incredible," and kinda all the DLC, but especially that and the Javik DLC, I was like, "Really wish this was just in the base game,"
Hmm.
because I feel like it improves the game, like, a lot.
Yeah.
Because like Javik is a great character, and It's not just that he's, like, a great character, and I kinda liked his story arc of, like, coming around to all of these, like, people he considered, like, lower life forms
Mhm.
from, like, his time, but, like, he also just gives a lot of exposition and, like, backstory to things because, like, he was there.
Yeah.
So he's like, they'll literally will be like Liara will talk about something, and then he's like, "No, that's not how it happened, like, this is how it happened," and then he's like, "I was there." Like,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, and I feel like that was so incredible, and that was one of those things where I was like, "Man, I can't believe that, he was just, like, day 1 DLC," and I think we talked about, I think was he was, like, on disc,
Yeah, he
so
was
I'm
on the
like, that
disc, yeah.
that totally seems like one of the things that was supposed to be in the base game that they were just like, "Okay, let's just trim this out," like,
Mhm.
because you don't need him to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Um,
he's effectively like the because Mass Effect 2 had, Zaid and Kasumi
mhm,
as basically, like,
yeah,
the extra downloadable characters, and so he was very much that, like, you can play that whole game and not touch Javik, and yeah, you miss out on, like, a lot of cool, like, Prothean backstory and lore and stuff like that, but, like, he he's definitely carved out that he doesn't have any big, like, crazy story mission moments or anything like that that like you're going to you know need him for or anything like that. um but yeah, it definitely like I very much like remember playing it, and I was annoyed by the whole like day one on disc DLC or whatever. I was like, whatever, it's $5 or whatever, $10, whatever it was. I was like, I love this series enough that I'm gonna want to consume all of it anyway. So yeah, I'll just I'll pick this guy up. And he's not he's like he's one that admittedly, yeah, I don't typically ever bring him out on missions or have him in my party and stuff, but he's still like the stuff you get in that from Ash's kind of in the story leading up to like unlocking him, and then just like checking in with him throughout the course of the game, is a lot of just cool backstory stuff. And same with Leviathan, it is like
yeah.
so much awesome world building stuff that yeah, I agree. And I remember Cameron said very much the same thing last year when he finally played through the Leviathan DLC. Is like this completely changes like what I think about certain elements of that game. And yeah, it's shocking that like there are massive amounts of people that have played this game and have no idea like what goes on in that DLC and stuff because it came out so long after the fact, as opposed to just being in there day one for you to enjoy and get that story.
Yeah, totally. Cause like, that was one that I hadn't had, like, spoiled for me yet, but that's why, like, when you kinda get to some of those, like, revealing moments, I was like, "Yeah, that's crazy," and on the other hand, I was like, "It makes a lot of sense," and if anything, it just makes, like, more sense than just like, "Oh, who are these people? Where did they come from?" And it's just
Hmm.
like, "Oh, this is kind," and it was one of those things where I was like, "Man, this is so smart actually," because it continues the themes of the Mass Effect story, and
Yep.
like, because like, not only was it like Geth versus Corian, but then the Protheans had also built robots that they had to like fight with in part of their story, and then
Yep.
now this is kind of the same thing with like the Reapers, and I
Yep.
was like, wow, like it's like it's that there's this whole like underlying theme of the cycles and everything just keeps happening over and over again, and I feel like it really like hammers that home.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I was like, man, I can't believe they did like, and even if it's something they did afterwards, I was like, man, I just wish this was like in the base game. um and because I definitely like, it's also just like is a cool DLC, like because when you there's a moment when you like go crash land on that planet, and
Hmm.
it's like it's kind of like the end or that one part on Rise of Skywalker where you're like in the water and like the waves are like splashing, and I was like,
Yep.
oh, this is a beautiful environment. Like it's like a really cool set piece. There's nothing else in the game that looks like that, and I
Yep.
was like that's like a super cool moment. Like
Hmm.
so that's just one of those things I think could like boost the main game up because especially like I like the story that that Mass Effect 3 kind of like tells somewhat, but I feel like stuff like that just felt so much better to me. And I was like, I wish that these were the missions of like Mass Effect 3 was like, hey, this one mission's going to be like 2 or 3 hours where you're just like hunting Leviathan and then you get all these crazy reveals instead of it just being like, hey, this is 2 or 3 hours, but you're just like doing like one thing. Like, cause like, I'm trying to think of a better way to explain it because it's like it is important that like you like cure the genophage and you can also like stop the war between the Geth and the Quarians. Like there's a lot of big things you do,
Yeah.
but it is like just these smaller missions that are so similar with like okay, you're going to drop in, you're going to kill people, you're going to make decisions, and you're going to get out. Like I wish it was just more of these like different bigger set pieces that was like oh man, because like that whole DLC feels a lot different than the rest of the game, especially with the fact that you're even like doing investigations
Yep.
where you like are overlaying stuff on the map and like there's irrelevant information you have to like parse through. And I was like, this is cool and this is different than anything else in the game. And that's why I was like, it would be really I would just wish there was more of like that in the like base game.
Yeah. I remember, thinking a lot of that same thing, because especially, like, so much of the base game is like, the big story beats are, okay, you can help these people, or you can find a third way, and which is, obviously a lot of Mass Effect stuff. And so when it was these, like, they almost play out more like just the extended versions of like loyalty missions from the
Yeah.
second game, where it is just, okay, you're gonna do this chunk of stuff for the next couple hours. And yeah, it's like a self-contained thing. It's like Mass Effect 2. It's the Batarian system side
Yeah.
quest that you hadn't played before. It is just, okay, I'm just doing this like complete random, side thing and again, like in the grand scheme of like DLC, like, yeah, people played it or people didn't, and like the rest of the story still plays off around it, but these elements do just add so much cool backstory and fill in the blanks in
Yep.
tying it back to the Kingsman conversation earlier. It's like, I didn't think I needed a prequel Kingsman story. I didn't think I really needed like a prequel like explanation for the Reapers, but like when we get it, it's so satisfying of like, yeah, I guess I did have questions about like how they came to be and what, and so like finding that there are like the creatures that effectively created them are still out there. They're just all they're in hiding, is like a cool thing. Cause yeah, I mean, like, I guess for me, it was the kind of thing like before that, I just assumed that they got wiped out, cycles and cycles and cycles ago, because, it's well trod that the Reapers have been doing this a long, long time. So the fact that you actually get that kind of like, the origin of the Reapers kind of explained, I think is just a cool, a cool thing that like answers and answers a question that I wasn't necessarily asking, but like it answers it in a very satisfying way as well. I also want to ask you about the Citadel DLC. What'd you think of that one?
Yeah, that was also great. And it was funny because that one, a lot of what I had only seen from that and kind of had spoiled was a lot of the stuff at like the party.
Mhm.
So I thought it was going to be mostly just kind of like that. And then
Yeah,
when there is like a lot more to it, I was
yeah.
like, wow,
There's
like
actually
this
a
is
whole
cool.
mission thing, and you have to fight a clone. Yeah.
Yeah, which that was funny because like, so, like, I'll start kind of from the beginning, but that also has a lot of really cool, like, set pieces and moments that are, again, like, super different than anything in the base game, like, even where you get to dress up and go, like, heist a casino
Mhm.
kinda, and, like, that was super cool, and that was, again, where I was like, "Man, I wish we had more of this," where it was, like, unique gameplay, and, like, I romanced Liara, so I got to take her with me, and then you're just, like, both dressed up and, like, on, like, a date in this casino, and we're just trying to rob it, like, and then it was funny because then there's all those character moments on the Citadel after that, like before the party, and then Kasumi's trying to rob the casino,
Yep.
and she's like worried you're gonna rat her out. And I was like, hey, it's cool. I'm cool. I'm not a cop. Like
Yeah.
you could do whatever you want. Like screw this casino. Technically, I robbed it earlier because you can hack the ATM and steal the credits, and I did that even though I was Paragon, and it gave me Renegade, and I was like,
Yeah.
all right, like
Whatever. You're still gonna get full Paragon. It's not a problem.
yeah, exactly. And then, but yeah, so then it was funny though, because I kind of like some of the story beats in that DLC I called before they had happened without knowing it. Because
Mhm.
like when Brooks was there, who's like the woman they introduced, who's like kind of the cadet. Right off the bat, I was like, I do not trust you.
Mhm.
I was literally like, because like every time she tells you to stay off your comms in like the first mission, where you're like shooting your way through the Citadel, and then when Liara like contacts you and is talking to you, she's like trying to butt in and tell them to like stop talking to you because it's putting you in danger, which I get is like a good setup. But I was like, man, you're trying really hard to cut me off from like my people and like keep me and keep us apart.
Yeah.
And then there's something else she does that I thought was like, I don't know, you're being like really sketchy. Oh, it's in the final act when you're in the archives. She's and no one else is on comms and you can't get through to anyone, but then she has like perfect radio communication through to you saying that like, oh, we got trapped or whatever, like come get us here. And I was just like, man, I don't like you like it's so you're so sketchy,
Yeah.
like But and then it was the same thing with the clone shepherd, where like because the first time you talk to him is like on the video call in the casino and it's like scrambled or whatever. And I was like, why does that guy look a lot like me? Like I
Mhm.
was like, and because I was just using like, I guess it probably takes whatever your character model is, but I was
Yeah.
just using default shepherd. So I
Yep.
was just like, yeah, he looks a lot like me. And then when it is like that reveal, like that honestly I thought was really cool. And I think it even makes a lot of sense where it's like, yeah, they dumped a bunch of money into you, but they also made a clone
Yeah.
and just in case, like,
Yep.
and then he's also like super jaded about you being like, like it's almost like that thing of like, oh, you're the son that always did great, everybody loves, and I'm the one that like nobody even wants,
Yep.
like I'm just the extra. And I think it's even kind of cool where he even just tries to do that thing of like take over for you, and like even when he changes your biometrics and all that, like where he's basically just like, yeah, I'm going to be the commander of the Normandy now, which
Mhm.
also was like one of the dumbest things I've ever seen Commander Shepard do, is when they're having this conversation and then he radios the Normandy and is like, "Hey, get the Normandy ready for launch. Here, I'm transmitting my commander codes right now." And then I'm like, why would you do that in front of them?" Like, because then immediately he's like, "Okay, I have your codes."
Yep.
Like, and he's like, "I can commandeer the ship now." And I was just like, that was just one of those moments where I was like, "Wow, that was not the brightest of Shepard."
Yeah.
Like, and
But
but
yeah,
it was that was
there's
a
a ton of
super.
fun in that DLC, and yeah, I like the standout for me is always going to be the house party stuff afterwards. But
Yeah,
yeah, there are just a lot of great beats, and like one in particular that I love in the like the missions themselves is like when you're going through and like all of your former squad mates are like up in the
yeah.
rafters doing their thing, and so you have basically everybody bantering and joking and riffing on each other on comms. It's like, yes, thank you, all of you. This like I hate that like we're only ever confined to three people down on a thing because this is the vibe I want. I want all of us just out there as like a squad rolling through, mowing everybody down.
Well, yeah, because that's what I was saying when we were talking about like Mass Effect 2, is I was like, because that end mission, it doesn't have as much of like the banter, but that end mission when you're the entire team and you
Mhm.
get to like make shots and like call things out, like I was like, man, I wish they did more of this in a lot of the missions. And then this DLC like is that. Like that's what I was like, oh, like when I got there, I was like, yes, this is what I was like wanted, where like we don't have to be all in the same room, or like they can be like up on a different level or below me, but like the fact that we're all working together and people are just like bantering together, like you said. Because even outside of the missions, even in just the cutscenes, like when you're all around the like conference table and you're all like making plans, like this DLC is like hilarious. Like
Mhm.
there's so many funny interactions between people, and where people just like call each other out on stuff and like make fun of each other. And I forget, it's been a couple weeks, so I forget some of the ones that really made me laugh. But there was like just things with all the different characters where it's that thing of like, you're like, oh, I love all these characters, and now they're all getting to like interact with each other and like just say different things. Like it's super, it was super funny, and like there's a lot of moments I definitely like ended up like laughing at.
Yeah, and then again continuing on into like the house party kind of thing,
Yeah,
like the different sequences that you get at that house party where there will be a biotics crew and it's like all the biotics people talking about their different biotics abilities and the cool things they've done with biotics or stuff like that, and it's just like seeing these conversations that because of the different characters you get across the games, like seeing Rex interact with Grunt is a lot of fun,
yeah.
or seeing Caden interact with Miranda or something like that. Like seeing characters that like didn't interact otherwise because they weren't on the Cerberus crew or whatever. Like seeing them kind of hop in and have that fun. There's just yeah, there's a lot of joy, and it is very much like just an endless like comedy storm of absurdity going on in there that I love very much.
Yeah, because like there's a lot of great moments there, but yeah, one of the ones I loved was like it was like Rex and Zaid and like Javik, and they were all like crouched up behind the couch doing like combat.
Oh
Like
yeah,
they
yeah.
weren't actually firing their guns, but then they were just like they were like acting out like a combat
Mhm.
scenario, and I was just like, yeah, that's like so funny that all these like big soldier dudes are just like doing this. And then there's one where like they try to get Joker to go shooting the next morning, And that was another funny thing just on I love the premise of it takes that thing of, like, when you're out drinking with people and people are trying to set up plans for, like, immediately the next morning.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, sure, like, you guys will go shooting next early in the morning. Sure, I believe you guys."
Hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I love all the like in the lead up to it. I love all the little like activities and stuff you could do with like your friends, or like you invite people over and you get like little one-on-one scenes with them or something like that. Um, yeah, just lots of fun to be had. Like kind of just chilling and getting again like obviously there was a whole bunch of stuff written about and said about the ending of that game.
Yeah.
And I don't have like big qualms or big beefs with the ending of the original Mass Effect 3, or even like the extended director's cut ending that you get. But for me, like the Citadel is like the send off for all those characters. It is this one last hurrah for everybody that, is especially just given the nature of the ending of Mass Effect 3, like the Citadel, assuming you haven't killed most of your characters or anything like that in in prior games or in this game, like it just gets to be a joyous celebration with
Yeah.
all of your characters before going into kind of the final mission versus like, you know like everybody basically saying their goodbyes or something like that at the end of the game. So it's just such a more upbeat thing. That is why that DLC has like just been the top of my like favorite DLCs since then. Just because it's so much fun. And then like I don't play it with it a ton, but I think I think I did a lot with it for trophies.
Mhm.
Because there's trophies tied to like the like arena that you
Yeah.
can get, where the
I thought that
VR
was really
arena or
fun.
whatever. And yeah, I definitely put, I think, more time into it this time around than probably when it originally came out. I think because it had the trophies tied to it. But yeah, like again, it's fun because you get to mix and match characters that wouldn't have otherwise gotten to fight. Like the fact that you can have Rex in there alongside Miranda or something like that, or Rex and or you can go back to like a Mass Effect 1 crew of you, Rex, and Garrus or something like that,
Yeah.
is just a ton of fun. And I love that, like, it is just, oh, do you want to fight against the bots? Do you want to fight against the Reapers? Do you want to fight against the Geth? What do you like? You can kind of mix and match and choose and stuff like that. So it's like a fun little like, especially if you if you need to get some of those like push pull activities or something like that, you have the opportunity. It's the arena from Ratchet and Clank,
Yep.
Rift Apart, that you and I talked about back with that game. It's like they give you an option or an opportunity to keep fighting these bad guys, if you still need to do some trophy cleanup stuff. So yeah, that's a ton of fun, running through those arena things as well.
Yeah, yeah, because I hadn't played that before, and I don't always get into like the combat arena stuff. Like, I definitely would do it in Ratchet and Clank because there's like prizes and it helps upgrade your weapons and stuff like that. But then this was like, because I played it and I got the trophy after like 45 minutes. Like, it only took me a little because you have to unlock, you have to beat a group of N7s, which is just like different shepherds, which is pretty cool.
Hmm.
And then you have to unlock that first. So like, I was doing pretty good in the combat arena, so I unlocked it pretty fast. But then like, I was like, well, and I just kept playing the combat arena. Like, I did more runs through with it, and I just kept unlocking like more stuff, and I unlocked most of what was in the combat arena. Like, I unlocked all the characters. I unlocked all of the maps except for one. Like, there was just one left, and I didn't have a token for it. And that was when I was like, I'm not gonna do one more just to get because like I never got bronze, and that's where
Hmm.
all the bronze stuff was. So I would get like gold or silver and have to convert the tokens down.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not gonna do that for one and then
Yeah.
sell the rest at a loss. Like, I was like, so I just don't have one of the maps. But even the different maps are cool. Like, the one I played on the most is the basic one where it's like the ships flying in the sky.
Hmm.
And it's like that's like the most basic map that I actually liked a lot because it's just kind of like a simple, easy map to do combat in. But like, there's a map that's like on like a jungle planet. There's a map that's like in a volcano. Like, there's all kinds of like crazy arenas. And to your point, yeah, like, it's fun to bring some characters you didn't get to play with back. And then also like, I ended up using Grunt and Rex a lot because like when you just do both of them, they just go out there and wreck shop. And I had my sniper rifle up on like behind a thing, and I'm just popping people in the head. Like,
Yep.
I it was like that was the way to go. And like, it ended up being a lot of fun. Like, I played it for like another almost hour after that, probably after I got the trophy, just doing that. And yeah, and then that was like that was a fun thing, and to what we were talking about too, like, I liked all the other activities. Like, it's fun to, like, go to the arcade and, like, play games with people or just see what that's about or, like, go run into Kasumi and, like, the casino and, like, oh, man, one of my favorites is when you go out with Garrus and you try to hook him up
Mhm.
with,
Oh,
like, a
yeah.
Turian woman.
Yep.
I was like, "Yes, this is the content I want."
You go out
Like
there and you play as Garrus's wingman, yeah.
yeah, I was like, "This is great content." Like, I was like, "This is what we want." Like, so that I thought was super awesome because that's the one thing that's always been a thing for me in Mass Effect, and I think it is for a lot of people. But I'm like, Garrus is your boy. Like when he's like your main, he's like my main guy that I always keep bringing with me. And then even in the it was like I guess it was the Shadow Broker DLC in two. You have your two squad mates, but then you go with Liara. So it's like you have to send one back. And I'm like, all right, bye. Garrus is coming with me. Like
Mhm.
if I want someone to have my back, it has to be Garrus.
Yep.
Um, so that's like, yeah, that was super fun. And yeah, like I'm kind of with you where like because for a long time I didn't like a lot of DLCs, especially because like there's always and we'll even talk about this with Devil May Cry in a bit. Like there's a lot of times it's just like I don't want to be mean to the developers, but I just mean there's like less time and resources put into it. So a lot of times it is just like it's small. It's not even that it's smaller, but you'll get like, oh, this doesn't have cutscenes. It's like in Mafia 2,
Mhm.
the DLC that told a really cool story, it would just put up a picture with
Yeah.
text on it of like, this is what's happening. And then
And
in
there's definitely like like Citadel aside, I would say,
Mhm.
there's definitely that vibe to a lot of the Mass Effect DLC as well. Like even the Lair of the Shadow Broker one, like you'll notice like you play through that whole thing, none of your other characters ever say anything or
Yeah.
interact in
No.
that. And so the one little sequence that you get is when like in your example, if it's you, Garrus, and Liara, the Shadow Broker knocks out one of your party members, so Garrus like ends up getting knocked out, beneath a desk or something like that in the
Yeah.
end fight, and and so yeah, it's I remember noticing that like with like the Overlord DLC, I think, because that
Mhm.
one you do bring like your party members along, but you're only ever talking to Archer in that or whatever, and so like the dialogue is only Shepard and the other people within the DLC. It is never like your other party members are all just in cutscenes in the background cleaning up or doing something like that. Like they're there for the fight, but they're never interacting with the actual story. And then you can see it in the credits where it's like, yeah, like only Mark Meir, Jennifer Hale, and the new characters in that DLC are credited on those DLCs. They didn't bring back all the other voice actors. So the Citadel, I think, is like the kind of like exception to that rule where like, yeah, they even if, like like depending on Ashley or Caden, they brought back them for for that.
Yeah.
Or like even something like Morden, who
Yeah.
by that point is most likely dead in the story based on how your story plays out. They still brought his voice actor back to like leave a voicemail basically that Shepard can find, something like that. So yeah, it's I think that is the one where like they went all out on the Citadel
Yeah.
DLC in particular.
No, yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you there, and that's why I was like really happy with it. And I know, like you said, that's like one of your favorites of all time, and I know I've heard a lot of great things about it over the years, and I definitely agree with that because that's what I was like. A lot of times, it's not always like the best, or it has like a DLCs like and it has like less time and money and stuff put resources put into it. But that one definitely has like a lot of care and a lot of love and just a lot of like effort and just especially if you love the series because even one of the things I forgot to mention too like it's the one of the it, like, genuinely made me sad, but it's like you can go check your, like, voice messages, and it's like Thane his was, like, trying to contact you, but
Hmm.
because of, like, the Alliance, like, putting you in jail, his messages weren't getting through, or he was just kinda, like, blacklisted, so it's like but then you get to see those messages, and I was just like, "Man, I feel so bad," like, he was trying to contact me, and I couldn't get through, and then, like, he then eventually you only get to spend so much time with him in 3 before he dies, and he always dies no matter what, so it's
Yeah.
like that but then his thing in that DLC is you get to have like a memorial and then people get to say like it's not even just Shepard but like other people get to say like things about him and I was like see this is like great like this is really cool to like have in here and it's like a thing for like yeah I like that character he's not necessarily one of like my favorites but it was still awesome to see him get like a cool send off and that's another thing I would like again like I would be like I would like to see more of that in like the base game which I get is like tough because I think one of some of my main gripes with 3, I feel like they were backed into a corner of like, okay, well, if we give this person a 4-hour mission, it's like so they might be dead in someone's game. So
Mhm.
it's like you because all of the missions that involve the characters you already know, they can just easily be cut out of the mission, like,
Yeah.
and just not be there.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where I'm like, man, I wish there was more like character moments and set pieces, especially with these people I love. But I get it, like, because they did this insane thing with Mass Effect 2 where your entire crew could die. And
Mhm.
so they have to have any permutation of these people could be alive or dead,
Yeah.
especially even including the people who could be dead from Mass Effect 1.
Yeah.
So it's like I get like that's a lot of work. It's like impossible almost, but that's like how I definitely feel that playing the game.
That's, like I think we talked about it, last time, but, there's I think it was GameSpot that did, like, a series that is basically, like, the saddest house party ever, and it's they go through the 3 games and basically, like, make the decisions in such a way that, like, the most people that can die will die, and so you end up with, like, just a bare bones crew showing up at the house party, because it is I mean, yeah, it's one of those things we talked about of, like, yeah, if most of your crew dies in the last game, that's why like that is why you have Edie and James as like your initial crew on this one basically is because like they can or it's like it's them and whoever your actually I guess it doesn't have to be because I think they can die as well at some point but like your
Mm,
Caden or Ashley
yeah.
person but yeah so it's Edie and James there's no chance that they could have died in prior games because they weren't part of your crew in prior game. Well, Edie kind of was, but so
She
like
wasn't like a physical body.
exactly. So like worst case scenario, those are your two crew members for this game. And it's like yeah, so like and then there are a lot of characters that like stand in for other characters. Like
Yeah.
there's Erdnot Rex, obviously, but then there's also the Erdnot that is kind of like the dueling one there in the like opposing clan or something like that. So
I think it's or
um
not Reeve
yeah,
or
that's
like something
that
like
sounds
that.
right.
Yeah.
Like if Rex died in the first game, like that's who's on is it Tutanka? Um
Tachanka, yeah.
yeah, Tuchanka in Mass Effect 2. And so that like that was the guy I met before I ever knew who Rex was.
Yeah,
Because
same.
I didn't know better. But yeah, so there's like a lot of those things or like Morden's assistant will come in if Morden died in Mass Effect 2 or something like that. And so yeah, it's like they they gave enough like backup characters so that you'll still have the big story beats, but you're not going to be as emotionally invested in those big story beats if they're played by non-squad mates or people that you haven't enjoyed spending time with over the last couple games. So but yeah, it just I mean like yeah, certainly the mechanics of everything that goes into Mass Effect 3 and the different permutations is wild beyond belief.
No, definitely. And one of the because one of the, and then because one of the things that even disappointed me a little bit, and I guess maybe disappointed is a strong word, but I definitely noticed it was like because even some of the decisions you make before don't have a ton of impacts on the last game, especially because like the one that stood out to me is like in when I played it before with starting at 2 and then going to 3, the council is like canonically you let them get killed.
Hmm.
That's like one of the decisions, kind of like you were saying, or not Rex is always killed too. So like that was my first playthrough. That's what it was like. So this time I was like, yeah, I'm gonna save the council. I want to know like they were so mean to me last time, and they were like, you let the old council die. Whatever. I'm gonna like save them, and so I saved them, and then they're like, yeah, well, thank you for saving us, but like no, like, and
Yeah.
then it just goes into the game, and I was like, okay, like I guess I did the right thing by saving you guys, but like somebody helped I talked to helped justify it where they were like, yeah, but they were also the council's on the biggest dreadnought in the fleet that has like 10,000 people also on it, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I did the right thing.
Yeah. That's yeah, it's like a lot of that ends up weirdly especially with the mechanic of like the war table and like all the resources and stuff. A lot of that ends up just becoming number crunching in
Yeah,
that in the final game of like yeah, if you save the council, that means you still have the ascension. Whereas if you didn't, the ascension you don't have anymore, but you do have like a couple extra of the Earth fleets because they weren't lost in the fight or something like that. And so like it ends up being like a lot of times it also even ends up being like a one for one, like, oh, the Ascension is 75 points versus like 3 25-point fleets or something like that. It ends up just being like a silly kind of thing like that. For me, it's much more, it ties into the thing kind of Greg always says of like, everybody has the same picture, but it's how you're coloring in the picture in the coloring book. And did you want to save those people, or do you want to kind of let them like it's the overarching narrative will play out the same either way. It's just, do you get a few extra scenes with these councils, or is the council ravaged and so now they've had to bring in like new members of the council, but it's still like there's still going to be an Asari, a Turian, and a Solarian. It's just not the ones that you could have saved in the first game or something like that. So yeah, I mean, same with like Udina. Like for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
like I often find like the Udina storyline unsatisfying,
Yeah.
because it's like, I gave you all the power you wanted, my guy. Like or and you still screw me over. What the hell? Yeah, I wish there were a little bit more variation in some of those things, but again, I get that they at some point they had to start kind of bringing everything
Yeah.
back to an end point, so it happens. But yeah, there's a, a massive amount of stuff that goes on there, and then yeah, some of it just ends up not really mattering at all in the long run of things, or it's flavor text, and that's
Yeah.
it. Cool. Any
Yeah.
any
Because I
final thoughts there on Mass Effect?
Yeah, because one of the last things, two things, I guess, because like I, I'm fine with the ending. Like, especially people were so like vitriolic about it back in the day, and I remember how much people were like up in arms, and like I was never that strong about it, but I don't like love it, like especially because like I feel like it is somewhat, especially now looking at all, I like kind of looked at the different options and kind of like even like I even like watched one of the endings on YouTube beforehand. Like, do I want to make this decision? And I'm like, yeah, they are all so similar. And then like I wish there was like an, and I know it's not the story they wanted to tell, but I wish there was an ending where you could like win, but like really win, where it's not just like hey, we did it and like I'm Shepard with the crew again. Like and or it'd be cool if there was the ending. Well, I guess there is if you like don't get enough war assets, but where you do just totally fail. Like I wish there was more like just like different endings than just kind of like being coming down to like the flavor text of like how do you want to rebuild the universe. Do
Hmm.
you want to do it through the galaxy coming together? Do you want the reapers to help you do it, or do you want everybody to could become like the geth and have like this mind connection, but no matter what everybody comes together and rebuilds the galaxy? And it's just like, and it's like I get it because that's kind of the story they're telling of like the galaxy coming together for like the first time, which is cool. But it was one of those things where I would definitely still hit me where I was like, this is like kind of limiting, and because like I don't love any of the endings. Like, and the first time I think I chose Control because I remember the Reapers helping like that scene. They like help you like rebuild, and I think that also makes sense with like Shepard sacrificing himself for like the good of humanity. Like that's because that's kind of what he does through all the games. Is like he's making sacrifices for the good of like the galaxy.
Hmm.
So I kind of like that, like too, of like he's making just one last sacrifice, and he's also becoming like he's the chosen one. So he's kind of becoming this like godlike figure that can, because then he can control the Reapers and the galaxy. He'll just be protected from now on.
Yeah.
But this time I did the destroy ending where you like destroy all the Reapers, and that was when I'm like, yeah, it's still like super similar. Like where I the thing that kind of holds me back from that is because you also destroy all synthetic life. So you basically like wipe out all the Geth, and
Hmm.
then also Edie would die because like, or at least like her like body version.
Yeah.
So I'm like, sorry, Joker. I know I told you to romance her, and that was a great like moment, but I killed her. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, and somebody also I saw was joking about how like also your automatic feeder will go offline. Like I think that like, and I'm
Yep.
like, oh, that's the real travesty.
Yep. Yep. All your fish are
Yeah.
gonna die again. It's Mass Effect 2 all over again.
Yeah, 'cause that happened to me the first time I played Mass Effect 2.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, like it was that was the ending I went with this time because I wanted to make like a different choice, but it was like where I was like, okay, like it's just you kind of get these like ending kind of scenes and paintings, and those change depending on like what you did and like
Hmm.
who you have and who you saved and who you helped. But that like it always just felt so weird where like because the last time I played and this time like I cured the genophage and I resolved the war with the Geth and the Quarians. Like I feel like you're doing all this important work, and then you immediately just go kill the Geth,
Yeah.
like because that's like the last thing you do before your like final assault. And I'm just like, wow, what a way to backstep on like resolving their. And
Yeah.
Tally even says like, oh, they're helping us so much. Like what we're doing stuff in weeks, what would have taken years. And I'm just like, well, all right, I guess that's over.
Yep. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I always go the synthesis route at the end. Just
oh, wow.
like that's just my like. I think in part because like that is like the quote unquote hardest one to get because you need to have like X number of war assets. So I'm like, well, that's the good ending in my mind is like that's the one that you only have access to if you put in the work to do
Yeah.
it. And I think just also from a narrative thing, I prefer that idea of like synergy and not trying to just control the reapers but like let's create something new. Is it's a vibe I can get behind. Did you ever back I remember it was like really significantly bigger back when like the original game came out. um the indoctrination theory that is like
Oh, yeah.
that basically like suggests that you're actually indoctrinated by that whole like by the end of that whole sequence, and that's why like yeah, taking control is the thing that the elusive man wanted. And,
Yeah.
and like and like that he's the one like connected to that visually and stuff like that. And it's also like that's I think that's the is that the renegade. No, that's like the blue option, right?
Yeah,
Taking
I think
control.
so.
And then like yeah, because
Yeah.
destroyed is like the renegade option or whatever. It's just like that's a weird good option. That's a weird
Yeah.
paragon option to control this, this mechanical race or whatever. Um so I remember like when the like indoctrination theory kind of got introduced and picked up steam, I was like, that's a really cool like fan theory thing that they pretty quickly came out and was like, no, that's not what we were going for. Um, but yeah, so that's why I always go synthesis there at the end. Um, but yeah,
Do you
it's
always choose the same ending? Like, you just go with that no matter what?
I mean, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I've seen all the other endings and stuff. Yeah, I sought them out
Yeah.
on YouTube, so I know what all the other endings do. But yeah, just for um, that just is typically how I play. I let that story play out. Like if I guess if I'm playing like, and that's largely because I'm playing as a Paragon kind of thing. If I'm playing like Super Renegade or something like that, yeah, maybe I'll just destroy and be like, yeah, screw this, we're done, we're done here. Because there's even the option. I think I think it was added in like the extended edition, but there's basically an option where you where you can shoot the catalyst,
Yeah.
um, and be like, I don't abide by any of your options. Screw that. Here's the secret fourth option. So you can certainly do that if you want. Um,
Yeah.
or basically, yeah, turn around and run the other way. um, yeah. But yeah, I typically like if I'm playing a Paragon run, I'll typically just do the synthesis and let everybody end with like the green eyes and all becoming one and whatever that means for the future of the series. I'll be very curious when the next movie or when the next game comes out that seems to be taking place after the events of Mass Effect 3, how they like which one of those they end up making canon and how what they try and do with it to resolve, the beats next, but we
The,
shall see.
I'm definitely curious about that, and a lot of the discussion I kind of saw was that people are kind of leaning towards it probably being Destroy because there's a scene in Destroy where Shepard is still like alive, like his
Yeah.
like shoulder pad like moves,
Yeah.
and then in that trailer they're like looking for Shepard. So I was like, that I mean that would like somewhat make sense, but like I feel bad for like then if like you like the synthesis ending, so then they're like, okay, well our canonical ending is like
Yeah.
this totally different one, like
And
so
that's
that's like definitely a weird thing.
yeah, it's almost like I almost wish they went back to Andromeda and were like, okay, we've learned our lessons. Let's continue the Andromeda story, but not because, like, I think the Andromeda story would have made eventually a potentially compelling trilogy. They just didn't give it enough time, and they pushed the first game out too quickly,
Yeah.
and so it was bugged beyond belief at launch and stuff. And so yeah, I think like it always gets a bad rap, but it's like, yeah, it gets a bad rap because you're comparing that one game and the characters in that one game against the game that you had, or the series that you had 3 games with to enjoy those characters. Like if you just compare Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect Andromeda, yeah, maybe you'll still side with Mass Effect 1 over Andromeda, but I think, like, I mean, certainly gameplay wise, Andromeda is
Yeah.
going to be, up leaps and bounds above. But yeah, it'll be curious to see where they go with the series from here. Now that you've beaten Mass Effect 3 and gotten the platinum on that, are you going to go back and do Mass Effect 1, or you just be like, no, I'm good with just 2 platinums?
I almost did. Like, I almost went and fired up 1, which is funny because this is what happened to me the first time I played the series. Like, I played 2, and then 3 came out, like, a couple months or, like, a year later or whatever, and I played 3, and I was like, "Man, I want more Mass Effects," so then I played the first one, and I almost fired it up and was like, "Yeah, let's do the first one," but I'm saving that just for, like, a full trilogy run through that I'll probably do at some point. So I kind of then ended up, like, backing out, and, like, I still have it on the system, and I'll definitely go back to it at some point because I was like, "Yeah, this is not the last time I'm gonna play Mass Effect."
Yeah.
But I definitely am looking forward to that at some point because, like, it'll be interesting to kinda re-experience that, and I think I'll probably come away with, like, a bigger opinion of Mass Effect 1.
Yeah. Cool. Um, well, I will throw it real quickly to my last topic of the day. We won't spend a ton of time on this because it is a live theater topic, which is a very tough one to be like, hey, yeah, go see this. Especially because as we're recording this, the last performance here, even in Phoenix, is probably almost done, or if not, is done already. But I went and saw Hadestown today, a musical that came out a few years back. Won Tony for Best Musical and a handful of others. Um, it tells the it is a retelling of the Hades and Orpheus no sorry Hades and Persephone story, as well as the Orpheus and Eurydice story of Greek mythology, which you can see a lot of that in the Hades game as well. um, and it tells it in kind of a, like, more, I'm trying to think what kind of musical stylings that would be. I guess it's like some of it is like folk. There's a lot of like swing and jazz to it too. But yeah, it's just like it's a song that, or it's a show that made, a bunch of waves a little while back, and I, like, I think a year or two after the fact finally sat down and listened to the album, was like, oh, it's like really good. I've always been a sucker for those particular myths, in particular the Hades and Persephone, and the tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice. There's a lot of like great plays that I've seen of the kind of the Orpheus and Eurydice story, and just the sad nature of kind of that tale and how it ends. And based on people's like shocked and gasp reaction in today's show, a lot of people did not know how that myth ends. Um, but yeah, it's just a lot of great performances. And even so, like today at the matinee I saw, um, both the Orpheus and Eurydice in my performance were like the understudies stepping into the role. And like I would not have known had I not like looked through the kind of the casting stuff beforehand to know, like, oh, those aren't the faces I was expecting to see on stage. Um, but everybody just knocked out of the park. Lots of great performances, and it was very much that feeling of, there are a few numbers in particular in Hadestown that like are the ones that I would sing along to or think about most regularly. And then there are a lot where like I enjoyed them, but I didn't like, they weren't the ones that I would go back and like listen to over and over again. But even just seeing it live and seeing kind of the cast and stuff, kind of like, there's just a joy to seeing people perform live and be just experts in their craft. And in particular, the Hermes, who's kind of acting as the narrator for this particular musical. He had the audience in the palm of his hand for a lot of it, and just like it was fun just seeing him kind of like milk moments, and just lots of great joy, and the stories themselves full of like tragedy, as is the nature of those myths, but just a lot of beauty in them as well. And they effectively kind of hit all those things, and some of the song like when the songs that like I really liked kind of came up, I was just like, yeah, they nailed these flawlessly. Wonderful work. So shout out to that. If you've never seen Hadestown, and you're a fan of Hades the game or those kinds of myths, maybe it's definitely something to check out if they ever, come into your town or come near your town on tour or something like that. I also shout out to my work that basically has this benefit that that effectively like covers the cost of the ticket for me, since I work for like an organization that supports arts organizations. They have basically a benefit that they call the live in the culture benefit, where they'll they'll give you up to X number of dollars each year to go see theater or ballet or orchestras or something like that. Go like support like museums, whatever. Go support the arts and the kind of the work that our clients do. And so the fact that they paid for that ticket means I got to go enjoy this show for free and have a great time with it. So shout out to Hadestown. Just wanted to give a little bit of love to that. You can go catch the like the cast album as well out there, and it's one of the shows that is, I would say, probably like 95% of the show is the music of the show. So like if you get the album, you're pretty much getting the entirety of the show. There's very little like dialogue outside of those scenes and sequences. So you at least get like the pretty solid gist of the story if you check that out. So yeah, that's some Hadestown thoughts and love I just wanted to share and spread. So I'll throw it back over to you, Frank, to wrap us up. The most recently you've been playing some DMC Devil May Cry. God, it would have been what, like a month and a half ago when you and Cameron took over one of the weeks.
Yeah.
Probably, I think, when I was in Disneyland, and you guys talked about you talked extensively about Devil May Cry and Bayonetta and stuff like that. So, what are your thoughts here on DMC Devil May Cry?
Yeah, I liked it. This has been on my backlog since it came out in like 2013 or like around there. I played the definitive edition for PS4. It like this because I wanted to play that before I even played the regular Devil May Cry games. Like, so I was definitely one of the people they almost captured trying to like reboot it for like a Western audience, especially because it was made by Ninja Theory, and I really like Ninja Theory even back then. And so like it's kind of this weird thing where like I think it's a pretty good game, especially because like the combat ends up being like incredible, kind of like you'd expect from Ninja Theory. I think it starts off a little bit slow because they kind of ease you into the mechanics. So the first like mission or two or even three is kind of just you with like a sword and your gun, which is like just super basic abilities. But then by the end, you'll have like three, you kind of have your base weapon like your sword, which is does like normal damage. Then you have like a heavy demon weapon that's like really slow, but it does a lot of damage, and it also is kind of like this demon effect, so it works better on certain enemies, and there's a couple enemies that can only get affected by that type. And then there's also an angel type weapon that you have by like holding L1, and then the demon one is R1. And so then the angel weapon will do less damage, but it's a lot faster and it's better at like crowd control. And basically, you just kind of combo all of these things together, even with your guns. So like you can like use the heavy weapon and like knock an enemy into the air, and then I can jump up after him. And then the one angel weapon is like a scythe, so then I can like spin my scythe and like slash him like a bunch of times in the air. And then I can use the heavy weapon again to like slam him into the ground. Like you could just do these really incredible combos that like end up feeling really great, and then the game ends up feeling very fast, which is what I tend to enjoy from like Devil May Cry and a lot of these like character action games. Like usually if I have a complaint, I'm like, oh, it's like slow, like because I want it to be like super fast.
Mhm.
Um and it was even funny because their loading screens have like these animations of like a black and white or like a blacked out like Dante on like a white background, and then the enemies will be like these like black caricatures, and then it'll just show you like it's just him fighting them. So it like taught me like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Like, oh, like chain the oh, I can do this, and then there's like a move I didn't have that I was like, oh, because I thought it wouldn't be useful. But then when I saw it get used in like the loading screen, I was like, oh, I get it now. Like I get why you would want that. Like so that was just a cool little thing. But to go into more of the actual game, like as somebody who now loves Devil May Cry, like I think it's interesting that what they pulled from it and like what they changed. But I definitely don't like the direction they tried to go with it, because like they totally mess up like Dante and like who Dante is. Like in this, he's just an asshole. Like, and I like don't like him that much, and especially like a lot of what they do with him, I feel like comes off with like maybe if I was like 13, it would be really cool because
Mhm.
it's like super try hard of like, look at how cool this guy is. Like he goes out to nightclubs and he drinks and like sleeps with women and like because he has a three-way in the opening cutscene for no reason.
Hmm.
And it's just like them trying to be like, look at how cool this guy is. And I'm just like, no, this guy, I don't like this guy.
Yeah, I know, Cameron and despite me not having any knowledge of Devil May Cry, Cameron has talked to me multiple times about the idea that, the original creator, like, wanted to make Dante cool without giving him, like without making him smoke, and I think he talked to you about that on that episode a few weeks back as well, and then immediately in this one, they basically have him lighting up a cigarette because that, gives him cool points or whatever, and it's just like, yeah, it's they that falls in line with, like, making it, targeting the, like, 13-year-old, like, fan for this. We'll talk about this on next week's, or this coming week's, that Bond show, but, um, uh, or no, 2 weeks from now, when we did, The World Is Not Enough, we talked about the idea of, like, Denise Richards is in that movie, and she's in that movie because they were targeting what was my audience at the time of, like, the 13 to 15-year-old, like, horny teen demographic or something like that. That does not pay off well for them. But yeah, it sounds like DMC was a little bit of that on the Devil May Cry side of things.
No, no, I totally think so, and because I even agree with you there on like the James Bond front, and then even what Cam because I remember Cam talking about that, and I think that's like super true. Like that's just totally how the game comes off to me is like they're trying to make him cool, and that's why they end up trying so hard to like just have him do all these things that like I'm just like no, like the because like it is the thing of like Dante in the PS2 one or just like regular Dante is cool, and it's just because he is like he's like he can be funny and he can be badass and he can be all these different things and even like a nice guy sometimes, but he's always cool, and it's just that thing of they have to try so hard to make this guy seem cool, and he is not. Like he is just and like I just don't like him, and I like his fighting style. Like he has a lot of cool abilities, but like yeah, I don't like him in like the cutscenes. Even towards the end, he definitely has like it's not a lot of character growth, but from the beginning to who he is in the end, he's definitely like a better, like more of a good guy. But it's just like it's not like a lot. Like they definitely could have done that a little bit better. But like I liked there's also one thing I've heard a lot of people complain about, but in the opening cutscene, there's like a thing where a wig falls on his face
Yeah, I've seen
and he's
that.
like, not in a million years. Like, and it's the Dante haircut of like the silver hair like down to his shoulders.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, not in a million years. And I'm just like, what a weird pot shot at Devil May Cry.
Yeah.
Like especially because I feel like it was so weird to me about like I feel like the people who made it liked Devil May Cry because they pulled in a bunch of references that and like thing in like lore from like Devil May Cry. So I'm like, okay, well clearly you guys got it, but then you don't get it, you know? Like
Yeah.
you understood the material. Like
As I recall, the new look of Dante was revealed long before, the game came out, and there was immediate backlash. And so as I understand it, that moment is like response to the backlash and like a pot shot at the fans who, because by the end of the game, Dante does have like the
yeah.
silver hair again, right? Like it's
Yeah.
basically like he gets it over the course of the game. So like it strikes me as they they knew where they were going with that, and they like the wig bit is them taking a shot at fans that weren't like that didn't even want to give them a chance to tell that story before making their judgment. But it's weird. It's definitely a weird thing. I've seen it like pop up in various list videos and stuff of like like things from the developers or memes, making their way into the game, stuff like that. Um but yeah, it's weird. I mean, like any time you're like taking a shot at a fandom like that, it's very easy for it to come off the wrong way. And it
Yeah.
sounds like, yeah, it sounds like especially if you are bereft of that like that knowledge and that reference years after the fact. Like, yeah, it's like, okay, why, yeah, I don't know why you made that like stupid joke.
Well, especially because then, yeah, then they give him the hair. So then I was just like, "Oh," and it's not as long, but they totally give him, like, that silver hair by the end, and I'm just like, "Alright," like, and it is a kind of this weird thing too where they're like, "Oh, this is a younger Dante," so I could see why they would be like, "This is who he was and how he kinda became sort of the guy we know," but then they change, like, core things about, like, the lore and the mythology, so I was like, "This is definitely like a reboot," like, it's definitely, like, a totally separate thing because in the original games, you're, like, half demon and half human, and in this, you're half angel, half demon, and that's what makes you, like, why you can use both of those abilities and kinda pull from both sides. And then, I mean, I even kinda, like, dig that and, like, the way it influenced the combat, and then it that influences the story a little bit or even somewhat because like, your brother is Virgil, which is from the Devil May Cry games, and so it's interesting that, like, he's all blue and is more of, like, the angel side, and then your Dante is more of, like, the demon side, even though they can both kinda, like, do both. It's interesting that they're kind of like they each have, like, a preference or more of, like, something that they're, like, aligned with, even with the where they wear, like, the crystals that have, like, Dante's is red and Virgil's is blue. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. The one of the things I thought was a bit cool is like you work with Virgil as like your ally through most of the game. Like he's not there a lot. He's kind of the dude that is like the man in the chair that like dispenses you on missions. And because they like I won't go through the whole story, but they basically ended up being like orphaned because the demons came and like were hunted their parents, and then they ended up just like being hidden at different orphanages, and then their minds were wiped, so they didn't know each other, but they end up like reconnecting. But then it's like, so I like because in the core Devil May Cry games, Virgil's just a bad guy the whole time, and like him and Dante have been at odds their entire lives, and then they kind of play with that. But so I liked the idea that like, hey, in this he's more of an ally to you, and then like they are like brothers, and they are kind of like two sides of the same coin. But then it is this thing of like, well, then at some point they're like, well, then Virgil has to be bad. So then they just like, but that happens in like one cutscene. So
Mhm.
that was why I was like, all right, well, I wish they would have like built that up more because I even thought what they were going for was like, oh, we're working together, but we have like two methods for how we want to get things done. And like Virgil ends up like would end up being like way more aggressive about how like he just doesn't care about people and wants to get things done. And Dante ends up being more of the good guy. But then it's like it definitely just ends up with him being like in like you to I'll spoil it a little bit, but you end up like defeating the final boss, which was like a really cool set piece, I thought. And then it's totally that thing of like you get one more mission, and because in the cutscene, Virgil's like, "Great, now we'll rule the world," and you're like, "What? No, like we
Mhm.
did this to free humanity," and he's like, "No, I'm going to be ruler," and then you get into like a whole fight,
Yeah. They
and
Last Jedi it.
yeah, it is definitely just like. But I was like, man, I wish they built
Or I
it
guess
up
Last
better than
Jedi
like
Devil
one
May Cry it or
cutscene.
DMC'd it.
They must have been like a huge fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, because like they I just thought they could have built that up definitely better because there's like one hint at it early where I thought they were gonna go with that is because he's like the bad guy is talking to Dante and is like, if I'm gone, who's gonna replace me? And that's when and then Dante's like, whatever, like no one will. But I'm like, oh, that's the thing of like Virgil just wants to replace him and be like king. So I should back that up a little bit too, because like basically one of the things I did like about the game is that like the demons have control over the human world, and it's through they have like avatars that are like humans that they're like posing as. And so one of them is like a soda corporation, and the soda is the most popular soda, and it brainwashes people to be like more passive and just let them do whatever. And
Mhm.
then the one of them is like a Fox News anchor, and it's like literally just like Fox News, but they basically are like, oh, we control the news, and so we can make you guys out to be the bad guys. And then there's also like the main demon guy, Mundus, is like the head of all the banks, and so he can control everybody through debt, basically. So it's like this, like it's an interesting idea, and there's a lot of like commentary on like modern day, and it's if anything more relevant now than it was like 10 years ago.
Mhm.
But like there that ends up being a lot of cool set pieces because like the soda there's a whole mission where you go take down the soda factory, and that totally it reminded me of the Futurama episode where they go to the Slurm factory and they find out how Slurm is made.
Mhm.
Like feel like it was influenced off that because like it's like really similar. um
Nice.
and then the Fox News level ended up being like one of the coolest ones, and my buddy had told me about that back in the day because you end up like platforming on like the like lower third like title cards.
Hmm.
Like they're kind of like it's like you're in this like weird you're in like the title intro sequence with like the globe spinning in the background, and you have to like platform your way over there on like these like weird little like banners and like news feeds. And then eventually the boss ends up just being like the main news anchor who is like his sign off is like just doing the Lord's work. Like, and so it's funny that he's literally a demon.
Yeah.
Um, but then it's like, the cool moment in that I liked is that there's a part where you end up getting, like, pulled into a TV, and then he's doing a newscast about, like, footage of you, from, like, earlier in the game, and then you get to play that segment again, like, but you're in the news feed, and it's like the camera, instead of being behind you, is, like, up on, like, a news chopper with, like, a film grain on it. So it's kinda just like, "Oh, this is, like, found footage of Dante," but it's like you're still playing the game, like, there's a whole fight sequence there, and they do that, like, twice because they're like, here's you on the docks earlier, and then here's you in the soda factory. And it's like, and I like that it's not just like footage of you. You get to like just do a fight that's like in this. It just was like a really cool setup for
Yeah.
like to like kind of change things.
Nice.
Um, because the game has a lot of like cool ideas. It just has a lot of other things. I just think it totally doesn't succeed on.
Yeah.
Um, and then it I think that's pretty much it for most of the core game, but there is a DLC for that called Virgil's Downfall, which kind of takes up after the game with Virgil. And again, it's like an interesting idea. I just don't think they executed it super well. And so what I was talking about earlier, like it's totally like way lower budget than the core game because
Hmm.
like the cutscenes go from being actual animated cutscenes to like comic book style where they are animated, but like kind of reminded me of like, you know how Infamous had the like Second Son had kind
Yeah.
of those cutscenes. It's like that. It's like these black and white cutscenes with like little bits of color, and like that sometimes made it even hard for me to understand like who was what, like because like eventually like Virgil's going through this kind of thing, and he's like in hell, and he kind of has like these visions of like Dante and Cat and like people from the main game, and they're like taunting him. And then this guy shows up, and I'm like, who the hell is this? And it ends up being Virgil. Like, and I was like, but I couldn't tell it was like him just because of the drawing was like different.
Yeah.
Um, but it was like again, that was one where I'm like, it's a cool idea and it's cool you get to play as Virgil, and he has a totally different power set and his moves are completely different based on like his abilities, which is something the core games have played with before. But it's another one where it's like it's an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and like it's just like it like wasn't that great. And it definitely like the core game I thought was only like okay, and then that definitely doesn't even hit those levels. But it does like kind of set up for a sequel that I know we're never gonna get.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm
Well,
just like, well, I was almost interested. Yeah, I'm like, I'm almost interested to see where you would have went with this, but like, I would prefer just more regular Devil May Cry, especially because like when we talk about now hindsight of like being 10 years later, like DMC5 has come out and that's a million times better than this. Like, I think DMC5 is one of the best action games ever made, and then this is just like okay,
yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad you at least like finally made your way around to playing this one, so you now have that like full perspective of the DMC stuff and Devil May Cry. Um, cool. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
yeah, there was actually one thing I wanted to give a shout out to because, like I said, there's a lot of cool ideas in the game and like a lot of cool enemy designs and like even things I hadn't seen before. But the thing that actually impressed me a lot was the overall level design of the worlds. Because you'll like start off sometimes where you're like in the real world, like in the soda factory or in the news headquarters, and you get pulled into limbo, and that's when everything like breaks apart and rips apart and becomes like a platforming section, but it's actually designed like super well because everything looks really cool and really interesting. All the levels are like uniquely distinct, pretty much, and some of the collectibles are like hidden so well that you basically have to like break the world and go in places like where you'd be like, oh, I can't go over there, but then you can if you like figure it out, and then that's where the collectible is. And I thought that was kind of cool because like there's sometimes where you have to like jump around a ledge and then back onto the platform, and then there's like, oh, I didn't think I could go over here, but there's a whole room. And then there's one that was like um there was one that like there was a fence like in like containers there, but I could see the thing through the fence. So I was like, how do I get that? And you end up just being able, you have to jump and like and hit like stand on like the corner of one of the containers and then jump over the fence. And I was like, but just looking at it, it looks like there'd be an invisible wall there and you wouldn't be able to get up there anyways. But like you have to put your foot on like one little pixel of the container and then go over. And it was just that thing of I'm like, that's kind of cool that they like embraced like you just breaking the world.
Hmm.
And so that was just something I thought was super cool.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that will just about wrap things up for this episode. Thank you for joining me, Frank, to chat about all these fun, various topics. Let's go around the metaphorical table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, yeah, you had mentioned it earlier, but I do want to give a shout out to That Bond Show. The latest episode is like about Goldeneye, like you said, and I'm very excited to listen to that one. I'm excited to for not only that, but for you guys to be in like the modern era with Brosnan and then eventually Craig.
Yeah. Yeah, as of this recording, I sat down and watched Die Another Day last night, i.e., the last Brosnan era one, and we're recording that tomorrow. And like Logan clearly watched it this morning because he put in Slack like Die Another Day, slaps or something like that, whatever dumb thing he said. And I was like, it's definitely a lot of a movie. So I think we're gonna have a little bit of a differing opinion on that one, but it'll be interesting. And then yeah, once like we get into the Craig era, it's like of the 3 that I've seen, I know I'm going to have a good time with those, and I imagine the 2 I haven't seen, I will still have a much better time with than a lot of the other crap that that I've sat through this year. But it'll be like it is going to be interesting kind of straddling this, like, known and unknown world for those last 5. Yeah, definitely shout out to that. Again, that is a YouTube only show, so you can go find that on youtube.com/thatnerdy site. Every Saturday morning, those episodes go live. Cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. The one thing I want to give a shout out to here is we didn't dive into it because Logan and I basically did a full episode on it on That News You Care About a couple weeks ago. But I also have beaten finally and platinumed Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. So Cliff Notes is incredibly charming game, ton of fun. It does all the right things with Lego stuff, and there is a shit ton of game in there. As I was telling Frank before we started recording, it took me 77 hours all said and done to 100% the game and get the platinum in that. And like so much of that was just, fun, dumb smiles on my face. There is like a lot of collectible stuff to do and a lot of like little fetch quests and stuff on each world, but like they're almost all some kind of fun joke or take on something, whether it's going and collecting pod race parts so that an Ewok can live out their dream of pod racing, or finding just all sorts of random miscellaneous characters because there's over 400 to pull from if you include like the DLC and stuff like that. So yeah, check out Lego Skywalker Saga. You can find more thoughts from Logan and myself on one of our recent That News You Care About episodes, so go check that out as well. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest content from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. As always, thank you again for listening. Stay nerdy and be good to each other.